Well, hello and welcome to the Cordell Cordell Virtual Town Hall. As always, I'm Scott Trout, CEO and managing partner of Cordell Cordell. And this is the beginning of our 5-part series celebrating fathers for the next 5 weeks. And we're joined by a number of our special guests today. I'm going to start with our Cordell Cordell panel, which involves Tamika, Rico, and Jonathan. Welcome. And we're also joined by our special guests, which today we're going to talk about. This is week 1. We're going to talk about what about dinner? Trying to bring to light some of the more positive things that we're going to be doing over the next 5 weeks, rather than talking about the law and talking about strategy. We're just talking about resources and things that men can do. And we're joined by our special guests, Jennifer and Paul Anderson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yep, thank you.
So what we want to do is really talk first and foremost about dinner. That's the topic of today. For the next 5 weeks, we're going to be celebrating Father's Day on every Friday. So you want to tune in not only for the next week and for the next 4 weeks, we'll be having sponsors talking about this. And so really want to have Jennifer and Paul, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what Kids Eat in Color is.
Yeah, so my name is Jennifer Anderson. I'm a registered dietitian, mom of 2 exciting boys who love to collect sticks and rocks, and the founder of Kids Eat in Color. Kids Eat in Color is a resource that helps families feed their kids easier, feed them better with less stress, and dealing with those picky dinner times.
You know, it's so important as we were trying to think about what to talk about during these virtual town halls. Typically, we're talking about strategy in court and pre-divorce, during divorce, post-divorce. And what struck me about the idea of dinner and really Kids Eat in Color is providing some sort of uplifting resource, whether you're at the beginning of it, you're thinking about it, at the end of it. It can be probably for guys especially, some of the more challenging times during and after this process is stop going out to eat. Start finding a way to incorporate your kids. And so how does really Kids Eat in Color help families in terms of your program?
Sure. So Kids Eat in Color really started because our first son started to fall off the growth chart, and it was stressful. And we had to develop picky eating strategies, helping, with best practices for feeding kids. And I'm a dietitian, so I thought I had some background here. Turns out kids don't care what you do. They're going to be whoever they are. They don't care if you're a dietitian. And I'm so excited that Paul was able to join today because while I had a lot of training, he came in with a dad perspective. And while I talk to families in general, it is not very often that Paul can come and specifically talk to dads about what it is like to feed kids day in, day out. We have amazing resources for families, from articles, your baby's first bites, all the way to iron for toddlers, picky eating toddlers, and sports nutrition in our online learning center. But at the end of the day, it really is like, what is this like at the dinner table? What is it like for dads to just pick up and take care of meal planning, which is actually something that Paul did.
Yeah, I'm curious, Paul, it is such, honestly, this goes across the spectrum of whether or not you've been divorced, whether you are, whatever it is, you can still be married. You can put dads in a classification of perhaps they don't know what to do in the kitchen. Now they're maybe forced into a situation where, what do I do with my kids? It's maybe the last thing they think about is preparing a meal. What do I do? What should I provide? Where do I go? How do I do it? I'm just curious, what's your perspective, Paul?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's obviously it's not like dads can't make be the meal planners and make the meals. They have all the same resources available. They might be coming in, as you've kind of suggested or alluded to, might be coming in without having grown up with necessarily having it been modeled for them. So that would be my case. Growing up, my mother did most of the meal preparation, except for grilling and breakfasts were kind of like the thing that my dad could do, and that's in our culture that's pretty common. So it's not as, so they have all the same challenges that anybody who's feeding a family is attending to in terms of, will my kid even eat this? Is this a balanced meal? When am I going to get to the grocery store? All the same challenges. But then there's like these other challenges that are kind of these soft challenges, like I haven't seen this modeled for me in the same way that, my dad was always fixing things around the house. I fix things out around the house. It just naturally, my mind thinks like that's a thing that I do as a dad. It's natural. It's easy for my brain to go there. It's not as readily modeled in terms of, meal planning and meal preparation and that sort of thing. In addition, there's just not as much acceptance and support for men as being the major, primary meal preparers, and thinking about it's not, the expectation isn't there. So your boss might not be as sympathetic to you, saying that you need to leave work early so that you have time to prepare a meal for your family. Men aren't going to get as much sympathy for that sort of a thing as, someone else. There's not quite as much community available for men. So Jennifer's Kids in Color community is primarily women, primarily mothers. So I go onto her website and onto her Instagram page, and I like and subscribe to all her stuff. But
the biggest fan.
I'm always in contention for being Jennifer's biggest fan. It's between me and her mom. We're always duking it out between who's the biggest fan. But yeah, it's 90% moms. So that it doesn't, to me, it's like, it doesn't quite feel like doesn't feel like my group of people. So there's that, there's that social component that's, these are all things that are just sort of subconscious behind the scenes, but they affect how we interact with one another. And it affects dads particularly.
Yeah, and I mean, not to stereotype the roles, but it's worked for many of those families where perhaps, the wife would cook or whatever it may be, and now dad is left to try to figure that out. So tell me a little bit more how Kids Eat in Color helps that situation and brings that resource to guys.
So we, Paul and I have both worked full time, got the kids, a million things going. Part of starting Kids Eat in Color was me developing a meal plan because I was working full time, had the kids, had a kid going off to school who needed 2 snacks, 1 meal a day. And I was trying to quit my day job to do Kids Eat in Color full time. So now there's 2 jobs. There's a million things, right? And Paul was finishing his PhD. So like our family was at the max. I developed a meal plan for our family so that I didn't have to think about it anymore. That's at the end of 2019. Fast forward, March 2020, everything changes, right? And one day I fall apart. I'm just like, I can't do it. I can't make dinner. I completely fall apart. And I come into the kitchen later that day, and there is Paul taking over meal planning on the spot. And I would love to hear kind of what he was thinking in that moment.
Yeah, he's thinking, what am I getting myself into? But I mean, this is the point is, guys will feel the same way. I know if I walked in the kitchen, I'd be thinking, one, I probably don't know where anything happens to be to actually prepare the darn meal. But that is, it goes from what groceries do I need to what, as you said, Kids Eating in Color, what should be there? What types of vegetables? What should the plate look like? I mean, that's really, I think, the things that maybe guys have going through what they've gone through with us is they don't think about it. And so where can viewers find out more information about yours? And I know we have a lot of questions from our panel. So where can they find out more information about Kids Eat in Color?
Well, let me have Paul tell you a little bit more about how he was able to just on a dime. I mean, logistically, it always worked out for me to do the meal planning. And now all of a sudden on a dime, he picked it up.
I think, well, first of it is there's a mindset issue. So you have to believe that you can do it, right? It's like, this can be done. But approaching it, so I am not a dietitian. So what do I know? But millions of families feed their kids every day. All right, so we can do this. I'm an engineer, and I went in looking at this, and just all the different details that we've been discussing that are part of feeding kids in terms of grocery shopping and meal planning and budgeting and making sure that the meals have the right sort of nutritional composition and all these other things. So my background is in project management for like big infrastructure projects. So we're talking like big bridges and roads and interchanges and things like that. For me, I started looking at it as very much like project management. It's got all the same components as project management. It has times, it has budgets, it has schedules, it has different components that are part of how you build a bridge. You have to do it in this order. You have to use these materials, and what is lacking for a lot of guys, a lot of people in general, this is a more universal problem, is you kind of get thrown into maybe you're in the kitchen and you're just thinking like, okay, how do I do this? And you're sort of doing it by the seat of your pants. You're not quite sure what goes together. How do I make sure that the food is ready at the right time, etc. What you want for an engineer, it's like no one wants to build a bridge on the fly. That's a very bad idea. What they have for engineers is they have standard specifications. They have like, this is how you drive pile so that you can build the bridge, put the deck on top of the bridge, and you have standard specs. This is the way to do it. So I looked at this is literally, I don't know if you and I have ever had this conversation, Jennifer, in this way, but I looked at what she had and what she had sort of created for herself and for her community of people. And I was like, this is like a standard spec. I can do this.
Yeah.
Right. And
right.
So so here's a shopping list. All I got to do, here's all the things that I could buy. And here are the things that I'm going to make in this order. And, I just need to circle this thing here and this one here. And I need to circle that we need peanut butter. And I need to circle that we need spinach. And then, and I know that this spec is going to make it so that, when I get that spinach, it's still going to be good in time for me to use it on Friday. Right. Yeah. So there's those sorts of things makes it so that a lot of that decision making is on the front end, and on the planning is on the front end, and you're following the specs, something that is going to work because it's been vetted, and you can then you've offloaded all that on the fly thinking, and so that's what the resource that we're referring to is this thing called Real Easy Weekdays, and it's what Jennifer created for her people, for her community of largely moms. But I looked at it and I was like, there's no reason why this is not my thing too.
Right.
And he did it.
Yeah. So you have a website. Where is it, as our viewers, not only live, but as on recording, where can they go to find out more information?
Right. So kidseatingcolor.com. It's got all the things. It's got the Real Easy Weekdays. It's got the snack book. It's got the lunches book. So if it's specifically hey, I don't know what to feed my kids for a snack, there's recipes. But if you need the system, which is what Paul was talking about, I'm brand new to this. How do I do this? Where are my specs? That's the Real Easy Weekdays system. That's the system. Yeah. That's what he was able to just kind of pick up and go from there.
Yeah, for me, just give me an instruction manual and I'll follow it. And that's what it is, a spec list. And it is a gender neutral thing, and it should be, right? And so you create a resource for moms. It can be also a resource for guys and dads. And I think that's the wonderful part I know I'm hogging all the time. So I know my panel has questions. So Jonathan, do you have something for about kids eating color?
Well, as you're talking about meal planning, I was kind of thinking, okay, I'm a really good meal planner. At 5, 6 o'clock at night, I'll walk in, I'll open the fridge, and I'll say, okay, what am I going to plan for dinner? and I take what I have in the fridge and I put it together and say, all right, there's what we're doing. Obviously, what you're talking about goes far beyond just opening the fridge at dinner time and saying, all right, now let's plan a meal. So with this planning, we hear the term meal planning, but what does that really mean? What is meal planning?
It's a great question. It's like putting it all together. Like, what are we going to have? What are we going to feed the kids? They have to be fed like 5, 6 times a day. It's the never ending grind. What are we going to send to school? What are we going to feed them after school? How do you see it?
Yeah, exactly. So in my mind, it's so Jonathan, you say you open the fridge. You're like, okay, what am I planning? Well, how did you decide what went into the fridge in the first place? When you're putting the things together, there is does this plate have a reasonable variety of things that I know that my kids are gonna, there's a high likelihood that they're gonna eat it, versus, like, this is maybe a new thing for them. So I'm just kind of exposing them to this new food that, I'm hoping that they'll get a taste for. Like, say it's, something, peas. I know one of my sons is like just not into peas. Okay, let's put a couple of peas on the plate, but I'd better have something there that there's a higher likelihood that he's going to consume as well. And in his case, it'll probably be, carrots, right? So, and then what's the nutritional composition? Do I have a decent amount of protein here? Do I have some carbs that that they need? All that sort of stuff. And then, the larger meal planning is like, how do I minimize the number of trips to the grocery store? How do I make sure that I'm buying things and storing them in a way that's like they're not going to go bad? Like, am I going to accidentally buy 3 things, 3 times in a row? Am I going to accidentally buy cinnamon, which I've done on multiple occasions? Now I have like 10 things of cinnamon in my drawer. Oh, I still don't need that. So all of that, and that's just one meal. Then there's like Jennifer was saying, then there's all the other meals. There's the there's the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, obviously, but the kids need well-timed snacks that have the right nutritional composition in them as well. So,
well, Paul, you brought up a point. We talked about peas, and there was a question that's been submitted that says, "What's your top-level advice for a picky eater?" I know you said, so we'll throw a few peas, but give them something else. I mean, what other advice? How does kids eating color deal with when you have picky eaters?
So when I think about like number one is don't make your kids eat the peas. Like, don't pressure them. I don't know if your kids are like my kids, but if you're like, hey, you got to eat the peas, they're gonna be like, I'm not gonna eat the peas, right? And so next thing you know, you're battling it out over 5 peas. Like, no parents,
nobody wins.
Capacity to do that.
Nobody wins when you're fighting over 5 peas.
Right. There are bigger fish to fry out there, right? So stop pressuring your child. Don't make them finish their plate. Don't make them eat the peas. Don't push. Just don't push, because if you say, you don't want to eat your peas, okay, you don't have to eat them. Now suddenly like you take the wind out of the sails, out of the fight, and you open up the possibility that your child can eat peas. Because if you're fighting it out, no way you're going to make progress. But if you take the pressure off and you keep putting peas on the plate, like Paul said, then you open up the door to it. But then the other side is really like making fun. And I know Paul can talk a little bit more about that as the resident fun dad.
Well, I mean, Tamika, I know you have a question. Why don't you ask that real quickly as we keep going through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I hear you talking about the peas and opening the fridge and what's in the fridge, but let's talk about the time needed to be able to do those things, right? I'm sure a lot of dads are like, hey, I'm busy throughout the day. There's only 16 working hours available where everyone can do things because 8 hours is spent sleeping. Why is it important for each family member to receive that nutritious meal, considering the time that's allotted throughout the day to be able to create that meal?
Yeah. So, I mean, bottom line is, do you want a whiny child all day long?
No.
The answer is no.
Right.
For your own sake, get the protein, the fat, the carbohydrate, and some color on that plate. Get it on the plate. Think of like all those meals, snacks and meals, they're all eating opportunities. You want to have that formula. Got to have a protein food. Protein foods usually have some fat. You want to have that carbohydrate, and then you want to have some color, fruit, vegetables, something like that. Because if you don't have those things, you will be miserable. Now, of course, there's the other side. You know, you want your child to be healthy, you want your child to grow and develop and all that stuff. But
you need sanity.
Sanity
I'm with you.
for everyone.
That's fair.
Well, it's, you know, Tamika, you brought up the 8 hours. 8 hours of that 24 hours is spent sleeping. Like, well, you could just as easily, you know, steal some of that sleep time to do what you're describing. But I hope we all know that that's a bad idea for exactly the same reason that Jennifer is describing, for why the meal planning is a good use of time as well, for your own sake.
Great.
It sounds almost like they always say if you don't have a plan, you're planned to fail. Some of us dads are just too busy to sit down and spend 7-8 hours going through different ideas of meals and menus. We can just go on your website. We can just download it, put in a click list order, and then we don't have to do all that work. Is that kind of what your product is for us? It's just a shortcut to.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome. I mean, that's the point. I mean, think about the difficulties, you know, and they become, like I said, deer in headlights. I've had guys say, now what do I do? You know, we can go to McDonald's every night on Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays, but that gets old. It is about giving them the instruction manual. And now that is the question is, how can you invite your kids to participate in that food prep process?
Okay.
And Jennifer,
kids.
Paul. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
Go ahead, Rico. Sorry.
No, what I was going to say is, you know, when I was a kid, I used to eat nonstop. Anything that came on my plate, I was the opposite of a picky eater. And now I walk around Publix, I walk around the grocery store, and I'm Googling what gluten is. So, you know, it's so important, you know, what resources do dads have or what they can use to just make sure their kids are getting healthy meals?
Obviously, I'm partial to Jennifer's resources, but actually, early in our marriage, one of the ones that I really liked that you brought into the marriage that I started cooking from was the More with Less cookbook and the Simply in Season cookbooks, which are they've been around for years, but they're super, but they're kind of like classics in the same way that, like, you know, like Julia Child's sort of classic, you know, meal preparation, and, you know, the things in those particular volumes are, you have a pretty high confidence that they're going to be pretty healthy. And in the case of like Simply in Season, you're probably going to be using produce that's in season, which is a nice touch.
Yeah.
And I think, Scott, you mentioned getting the kids involved with the meal making process. This is a really great opportunity for dads or anyone to. I talked about putting the peas on the plate. In Jennifer's parlance, that would be called an exposure. You've exposed the child to the peas, whether or not they actually put the pea in their mouth and chew and swallow it. That's a couple steps down the road, but they're never going to eat the pea unless they're exposed to the pea in the first place. And getting involved with chopping, I don't know if you're chopping peas, but chopping carrots or chopping the vegetables or stirring making the scrambled eggs, doing all those things, those are other ways for kids to get involved and get exposures to foods that they otherwise might not they might be a little bit wary of. They're testing it out. They're not sure. Is this safe? Is it going to feel weird in my mouth when I eat it? But if they've been chopping it beforehand, it's not nearly as foreign as when it just sort of surprise shows up on their plate. So involving kids in the meal preparation process is something that I do as much as I can, and is a great it's a great way to bond with your kids and help make it easier for them to adapt to new healthy foods.
Well, Jennifer, Paul, thank you. It's all the time we have. I know you're busy. We have to let you all go, but I want our viewers to go to kidseatincolor.com. Is that right?
Right.
All right, check it out. kidseatincolor.com. Great stuff, great resources. Jennifer, Paul, once again, thanks for joining and providing our viewers great resources to kind of take them to the next step. And I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks all. So as you continue to think about, we just ended there with Jennifer and Paul. We talked a little bit about kids getting involved, and that leads us into really our sponsor, which, when we were thinking about things like we want to make dinners and lunches for your kids that are healthy, nutritious, getting them involved, what better than HelloFresh? So HelloFresh, if you've not heard of it, it's something you need to check it out. They're our sponsor, and they provided us, and essentially you all, with an amazing discount and a code to use. HelloFresh, and we're going to talk about that in a second with my panel here. You're going to use promo code Cordell Law 2023 to receive a discount over the course of your first 5 boxes. That's Cordell Law 2023, and that should be in the chat section for you, the Q&A. And you'll see that there at the end of this, you'll also see a QR code. So you want to check that out. So let me turn it over to my panel here. In terms of, have any of you used HelloFresh or meal prep to cook with your kids?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, my wife and I did it. We actually started it as a way to lose weight. Like, it was our plan of, hey, if we do HelloFresh. But one of the things that Paul and Jennifer kind of mentioned, I think really it's an investment in time. It's going to take you 30 to 60 minutes for a meal. But it's a great investment. I love sitting there. I gave my kids chores. Someone was chopping, someone was stirring. And the more I involved the kids, the more I found that they actually ate the food we were cooking. Because the first couple nights I did it, I just cooked it all and my kids they didn't want nothing to do with it. But, not only are the kids getting healthier, but, it's healthy for us. Because I think what happens when we don't plan ahead or get these meal plans is we just end up eating the same 5 meals over and over again. Everybody has their go-to, we're going to on scrambled eggs and toast for dinner, But yeah, I liked it. I thought, it helped us expand, especially for the kids, into menu items that we never would have tried probably before.
If I can, so I would just want to say I hadn't used HelloFresh before. And so for the people who hasn't used HelloFresh, it's actually very rewarding. So I looked into using HelloFresh, and obviously looking at it, I talked earlier about the time that's needed to be able to prepare these meals. It saves so much time because you can go on there if you're a vegan, a vegetarian, a pescatarian, whatever the case may be. You go on that site and you just select what it is that you want to cook, whether it's spaghetti or whether it's a full course meal. They prepare all of the ingredients and so forth and ship it to you. They can do it for a day. They can do it for a week. They can do it for 2 people to 10 people, right? It's your choice, but it saves so much time.
Yeah. So Enrico, there's a question that's come in, and it's a tough one, obviously, but think about it. It is, how would you suggest navigating this? Alan asks, she's a healthy cooker. He doesn't really want to say anything negative about their mother and her food choices, which happens to be fast food. So how do you navigate that? For Alan, what is he to do in this type of realm and not be negative towards his spouse?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and it's quite common, actually. And, when you have such differences when it comes to food, I think the first step is just the communication, all right? Being able to communicate effectively with your spouse on it, but also the education to your child. When that child is with you and in your, care and custody, and you're with the child, that's where you get to take the child to Publix, to the grocery store, to the market. Explain to the child food, healthy choices, what nutrition is. and educate the child. Because at the end of the day, you know, that child might have a choice over with mom, or might say, I'd prefer to eat something more healthy. So it's not so much forcing the child to, hey, this is what you're going to eat, or mom, this is what you have to do. It's more about an education. And hopefully that child feels better over time. That this is making me fit. This is making me more energy. This is a good meal. And you get to spend the time with the child as well when it comes to meal prepping, being on the grill. And that education is vital. Now, my mom and dad growing up, they had vast differences on food. And my dad, we'd go to Publix and there'd be steaks and we'd go there and we'd grill, and my mom on the other side, vegetables. But each of them kind of balanced each other. And as I grew older and kind of decided, hey, this is the right thing, and I've started playing sports and doing all this, the nutritional side of it took over. And I think now I started to influence my parents on what I wanted and what I want to eat and what is good for me and healthy for me. So it's a fine line between dictating, you know, this is what should be happening, this is what should be eating, to educating.
Yeah, education's huge, because I think, as you suggest, naturally, they may just start saying, hey, mom, that's not good for me. I've done some research. I've looked at some of the studies. That's kind of the way it probably should be handled. So, Tamika, last question I know we have, and we've run out of time, but I want to toss it to you. Now, Dale says, how would you suggest handling a situation where your child's mom forces him to eat? I tell him, do not eat it if he's not hungry, but not sure that's a good way to handle it.
No, not at all. So I would tell you, in a situation where there's something that the child shouldn't eat, it's probably wise just to minimize having those things available for accessible purposes, right? Because if the kids see it, they want to gravitate to it. They know it's there. And so if you can avoid having certain things, or maybe an abundance of things in the house that you know the child should not eat, it's probably wise to take that route versus just telling the child, hey, don't eat that if you're not hungry, what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to again thank the panel. I know we went long. I want to thank our guests with Kids Eat in Color as well. And then don't forget about next week, next Friday. It's the second part of our series. It's going to be a good one. Making memories. One of the other issues where often dads say, now what do I do for lunch? Is that they think about making memories. How do I make this time special? What do we do together? And so we're going to have a special guest from our Pact who's going to be talking about making memories. So don't miss out next Friday with our panel from next Friday on the 9th. Same time, same place. So don't forget also the QR code that we're going to flash, which is the discount code for HelloFresh Cordell Law 2023. Go ahead and order. You'll get a substantial discount. So thanks to HelloFresh for that. And the rest of our panel, I appreciate you joining. Until next Friday, second installment, celebrating Father's Day every Friday in June. We'll see you then.